Okay. I haven't made a video in over a week. Um, that's basically because the media in Australia seem more interested in domestic United States politics and domestic European politics and keep on throwing at us as a fundamental existential worry that we should have in Australia when we're actually about to have an election and we're not talking about any of those things. Now, yesterday I spent all day researching and looking into Ukraine because I didn't want to say the things I was going to say without receipts. And at the end of the day, I came across a news article from the Sydney Morning Herald from the 3rd of March. So from yesterday morning, we finally had a point of difference between the two major governments, Liberal and Labor. We don't have any major point of difference. And that is, we live in a very upside down world. And we live in a strange world where Labor are now, if you vote for Labor, you have a possibility of the youth of Australia being sent to die in the Russian front. That is just, I can't wrap my head around that in any way. When did Labor become the pro war party? And if you vote for the Liberals promise you that they won't send your kids off to Ukraine to die. Albanese open to consideration of contributing troops to the Ukraine peacekeeping, but Dutton is sceptical. This is from the ABC. The ABC is my main source of news, by the way, and that's just a poverty thing. News costs money, and I don't have that money. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has said Australia is open to consideration of its involvement of any peacekeeping process in Ukraine. Troops sent to Ukraine are just troops sent to trick America into going to war with Russia, which concludes a third world war. Now, I really want to get into that. Putin says NATO will be in the war if the US or allies let Ukraine fire long range missiles into Russia. I just want to read a little bit of this article. Russian President Vladimir Putin, and this article's from the 13th of September 2024, so it's months ago. Russia, and it's from CBS News. Russian President Vladimir Putin warned Thursday that a decision by the US or NATO allies to allow Ukraine to use Western supplied long range missiles to hit targets deep inside Russia would be viewed as NATO's direct participation in the war, which he said would significantly change the very nature of the conflict. Flight assessments for these missile systems can, in fact, only be entered by military personnel from NATO countries. Ukraine servicemen cannot do this, and therefore it is not a question of allowing the Ukraine regime to strike Russia with these weapons or not. It is a question of making a decision of whether NATO countries directly participate in military conflict or not, Putin said in response to a question on Thursday. This is what people mean by everyone's playing games with World War III. Now, in relation to troops going to Ukraine, because Anthony Albanese has basically said we're going to send our youth, our children off to Ukraine to die. I can't believe that Liberals have said no. Right? That makes the Liberals the anti-war party. So our only real hope in the next election is to have a Labor minority government with the Greens controlling them, so the Greens can't the Greens can stop Labor from sending our kids to war. I'm terrified of the Liberals getting into power because I want to keep my disability support pension. And the last time the Liberals were in power, they took the disability support pension away from almost 500,000 people. Now, out of those 500,000 people, only 100,000 of them have gotten their disability support pension back. The rest are all stuck on mutual obligations. So I'm terrified that the Liberal Party is going to come in. Please don't see this as a view to vote the Liberals. The only way out is to vote Greens if you live in a capital city. So that's what Putin says about this. Is Putin says talk of NATO troops being sent to Ukraine raises the real threat of nuclear conflict. Moscow. Russian President Vladimir Putin vowed Thursday to fulfill Moscow's goals in Ukraine and sternly warned the West against deeper involvement in the fighting, saying that such a move is fraught with the risk of global nuclear conflict. And he's dead right. That has to do with MAD. The only thing that has stopped us from having a crazy nuclear war in the whole entire length of my lifetime and before I was born is a system called MAD, Mutually Assured Destruction. Meaning if NATO troops fight Russia, Russia's going to launch a whole heap of nuclear warheads at Europe and America is going to respond, and the whole of the Northern Hemisphere is going to be destroyed in the nuclear holocaust. This is why what we're doing is crazy. So yeah, if we send troops to Ukraine, Mr. Albanese, what you're doing is taking part in starting a nuclear conflict. So I spent all day looking at everything about Ukraine, from the Minsk agreement to stuff like that, to make the argument as to why we shouldn't send our youth to fight in Europe. And I really don't see why I should have to argue that point. Like, the fact that the media doesn't argue that point, the youth of Australia dying on the wheat fields of Europe is just a waste of the youth of Australia. And any politician advocating that we could possibly do that should be thrown out of office. I don't care what type of, what party they belong to. My children don't deserve to die because they're poor. Now, so after a whole day of going through all that and running up my arguments, and then I come across this. And this was written on the 3rd. Australia to send Ukraine more tanks but no peacekeeping troops. Australia will step up the supply of Abrams tanks to Ukraine, and European leaders make a new push for a ceasefire after 3 years of war, despite a dramatic warning from the United States about scaling back military support. Like, we've got a right to tell the people of America that they should continue fighting a war because we need them. Doesn't that say something a bit more about how piss weak we are? The Australian support will not come with peacekeepers to patrol Ukraine in the event of a ceasefire with Russia, amid talks in Europe about assembling a force to help secure the country's border. The bipartisan support for Ukraine came at the same time as growing dispute over, and the whole article just goes in. But the most important part of that is bipartisan. So both Labor and Liberal have agreed not to send troops to Ukraine. So why are we having this argument in the media? I don't understand. Are we sending troops to Ukraine or not? Right? Like, this is the only point of difference between these two political parties. one party will send a youth to die, the other party won't. What's really surprising of which party it is. That's about all I have to say on all this. But yes, it's all very wrong. Our media is full of warmongers that seem to push the point of Australia's warhawks who want to send our youth off to die. I notice they're not saying that they want to send their youth off to die. They're not asking their children to go off and die in the battlefields. They're asking our children to go and die in the battlefields. And where's the media in all of this apart from cheering it on? The ABC really has become the state media of not the Australian government, because it doesn't matter who's in power. So it's basically the state media of the Australian Defence Force. That's all I've got to say on that. Just remember that if you're entitled to redress, chances are you'll win a civil lawsuit. Go see a lawyer. Arnold, Thomas and Becker are really good at redress law claims. Goodbye.